Hello, everyone. Welcome to Airfocus's event today. Um, let's give ourselves a couple minutes as more people are settling in. Meanwhile, please let us know where you are joining from and how is the weather in the chat box on the right bottom. And I will quickly introduce myself and then maybe wait a bit more for more people to join and then give the stage to Yazan. I'm Ala from Airfocus. I am a junior marketing manager here in Airfocus, and most of the time you can see me in the chat box. But here I am on the stage, second time. So hi, I'm from Istanbul. The weather is super sunny here. It went up in like 2 days, so it's like 27, 28 degrees, but loving the summer, of course. Okay, so Yazan, hi. What are you
Hi,
doing?
how are you?
How are you? And please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Alan. Very excited to be here. And my name is Yazan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of User Pilot. We are here today to talk more about, I feel like there's a lot of focus on user onboarding and how to drive user activation. But today, we want to talk more about secondary features, how to drive adoption for more complex and advanced feature set, which is obviously will help with things like stickiness, reducing churn, improving retention, getting upgrades, and you know, creating more loyal customers. So I'm very excited about that.
Yes, welcome once more. I am super excited for the topic and cannot wait to learn from you and maybe your cases in user pilot. Um, I think we could slowly get started.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
So
You can have the
I will
stage.
try sharing my screen.
Okay, let's see.
Hopefully it works this time. Okay. Um, now once you're able to see it.
Yes, in a perfect way.
Cool. I guess we can get started.
Yes.
So let's just slowly go over some of the topics that I want to discuss today. So we'll start out with a little of an introduction about feature adoption in general and why it's important, more important today in SaaS than say 10 years ago. Very simply kind of understand the user journey, and then I will keep discussing things in the most simple way today. And then we're going to talk about the biggest problems that SaaS companies have, which again centered around focusing too much on producing new features, not enough on actually the adoption of existing features. Most of the focus is happening on the user onboarding side, and then that's it. And that obviously leads to a lot of problems because yes, activated users are getting value, but when they're not becoming power users, then you're really just hurting your churn, your expansion revenue, and then we're going to talk about like what is the framework really that we need to set to kind of change that and the necessary shift in mentality. And here we're talking about both product teams and growth teams, right? What is kind of the change that we need to do to prioritize feature adoption in general? And we'll go kind of through the framework in a simple way, hopefully. Okay.
Before we start, I want to ask a question to our audience, if that's okay. Here we go. Okay, so I wonder, what do you think is the main reason why secondary feature adoption is difficult for most SaaS companies, as Yazan mentioned before? I'm sure he will explain us in a better way, but I just want to learn, what do you think about it? So let's give like a couple seconds. And also thanks Yazan for like coming here with a framework. I'm happy to like and excited to see it.
It's a starting point, right?
Okay.
It's a good starting point.
Okay. So let's see the results. Are coming slowly. So most people are thinking the reason that is the secondary feature adoption is difficult for the most SaaS companies is complexity or lack of understanding of the features. So, and there is like the second answer is like second most answer one is insufficient emphasis or focus on promoting secondary features. So I think if you're thinking this way, you're in the great place to be. I'm sure Yazan will emphasize how important they are and how we can just like improve them to increase user retention.
Okay,
Yeah, we can go ahead.
so yeah, we'll go ahead. So just kind of as a starting point, I want to kind of emphasize that today the existence of any SaaS business is heavily reliant on continuously providing value for users. So and this is different today than it was say 15 years ago. In today's world, especially in the SaaS B2B business, the customer journey. And notice I'm not saying this the user journey. The whole customer journey is kind of shifted entirely to the product itself. So, from the first time you hear about a brand, right, to starting a trial, to activation, to the adoption, retention, this is the communication. It's all happening within the product. So the product experience becomes like really, really important. The problem, as the poll initially in the audience is saying, is that the complexity of the B2B SaaS, the complexity is making it leads to significant a lot of these features not being utilized, right? So and that uh, uh, kind of leads to billions and billions of dollars of R&D that are lost. Sorry, just give me a moment.
Of course.
Right. So, and today it becomes no longer enough for product teams to simply build and design the best features. Instead, the product as a whole must be personalized and tailored to the individual user persona and the stage of the user journey, right? Um, and so this is kind of the starting point, right? We don't want these companies to become feature factories. We kind of want also to emphasize, you're already spending a lot of time and money building these features so that nobody ends up using them. Okay, so talking very quickly about the user journey, right? So we have the first phase is the evaluators. So those are that they hear about your brand, they come in, they kind of understand the value, but they haven't really got the value out of the product yet. So these are, they're trying to kind of understand the value, and you want to push them to user activation. User activation is the moment where you start getting value out of the product, and we call these the adopters. So the adopters usually are the ones that are using your core features, 2 or 3 key features of the product. Say, for example, in HubSpot, they're the ones that are, connecting their email, uploading a list, sending a sequence of emails. And that's where most companies are focusing today. They're mostly focusing on moving people from evaluators to adopters. And that's great because, obviously improvement in user activation will lead to improvement in free trial and more revenue, right? But that's not enough. So what we want today to talk about is how do we move more adopters, the initial adopters, to power users and advocates. A power user is, more immersed in the product. They're getting way more value, and that's by using a lot more secondary features. And then you have the advocates, which is a power users are very satisfied with your product, and they are actively recommending your product to others. So again, the problem with most SaaS companies is that they're just focusing on the user onboarding and the initial activation. And by the way, this is actually the easiest. User activation is the easiest to solve because you know what is your core value is. Like if I'm Slack, for example, I know that I need my users to invite other team members and create workspaces, right? So, and you can easily push for that in the beginning, right? What becomes harder is that, and again, talking about the very complex B2B software, if you have 2 or 3 key core features, it's easy to push people to these core features. But what happens, with the other 97 features that are very complex, when do you push them, right? So that is the problem, is that you're focusing too much then on building rather than pushing these existing features. So and another thing is that the importance of secondary features is not really understood, because most of the KPIs that we're tracking, especially in growth in a PLG motion, is what percentage of users I'm activating, and what percentage of users am I moving from free trial to paid, like the initial monetization. We're not looking more on like stickiness, like how, and I'm not just talking about adoption. Adoption is obviously one thing, but also stickiness. How much are they coming back and using the feature, right? What is the kind of the expansion revenue? How are we driving upgrades, etc., etc. Okay, so again, a question that might be asked is, why is this difficult? Why do most companies actually don't get this right? So obviously,
Before you continue, can I ask a question? So I was thinking, if the secondary features are like, I think from the graph that you showed, the power users are coming from the secondary features, and then they become like advocates. And that made me think of, are the secondary features actually what makes your product unique and makes you different than the competitors?
A lot of it, yes. So, if you think about 2 similar products, they probably share a lot of the core functionality, and then kind of the magic happens in kind of the secondary features, right? So obviously, you want to focus on that, and to differentiate. So 100%, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not less important than those core features.
It's actually more important, in my opinion. It's actually more important in my opinion, because the more stickiness, the more of your users that are power users and using a lot of these secondary features, the more stickiness they have, and the more costly it's going to be for them to actually leave the platform. Right? But yeah, it's much easier to tackle user activation, way easier, right? So another thing is that from a business point of view, it's much easier to correlate kind of the initial activation with the initial say MRR that's coming in. So new gross MRR. So yeah, we focus on activation. We improve our free trial to paid conversion. We make more money. And we're not thinking as much about the net revenue retention, where part of the equation now becomes churn, retention, and expansion revenue with upgrades. But the most important part of why this is difficult is that, unlike activation, secondary feature or feature discovery is not linear, right? So if you think about any activation journey, it's most of the time it's very linear, right? Or at least, even if it's not linear, it's like a bunch of events that I have to do, and I have to do them in the beginning, right? But when it comes to feature discovery, well, there's no certain path, right? You're not gonna, if you have 100 features, right, in your product, you're not gonna push them all in the beginning. You're definitely gonna push your core features in the beginning, and that's easy. But what about the 100 other secondary features? When are you going to push them? When in the user journey are you gonna say, you know what, this is the time for me to push this to a user? So for example, take an example, HubSpot as an example, right? HubSpot literally has maybe 4 or 5 different products, and each product has a ton of features. When are you really, so say, you know, you want to push templates in HubSpot, when are you going to push it, right? And that's the most difficult question, right? So the idea here is that every feature, every secondary feature has a motivation. That's the key idea right here. There's a trigger, there's some sort of behavior that you need to understand to be able to push that. So these are the motivations that you need to understand. They can be internal or external. An internal motivation is, you know, and I have a bunch of examples here that I think can make this easier, right? So let's talk about actually a couple of products. Talk about Jira and let's talk about Salesforce, right? So what use does a Gantt chart has for a product manager if they haven't set up their projects and tasks? Like literally nothing, right? So think of it this way. I have a feature. I've just, you know, spent a lot of time and money developing my Gantt chart, right? How am I going to push it and when? Does it make sense to push it to everybody, or does it make sense to push it for users after they have set up multiple projects and tasks, right? And then they can kind of put it in this view where they can literally visualize a timeline of when these tasks are going to end, right? And again, this is like the trigger, the motivation. Same thing with Salesforce. Like, why would I need advanced reporting in Salesforce or advanced dashboards if I don't have a lot of data, right? So now we're talking about these motivations, and both of these motivations, by the way, are internal, right? So these come from internally from the users wanting to achieve something faster and more efficiently, right? It can also be external. So say that, you know, company X now wants to become SOC 2 compliant for more security. And, you know, part of the change is that now they only need to use single sign-on SSO for all of their users. So now, you know, this is kind of an external factor where the company would say, like, to all of their employees, you need to use SSO. So then kind of that is a motivation for a user to go and say, okay, well, I'm going to, you know, activate my SSO sign. Okay, so, you know, these are some of the motivation. So this kind of requires a little bit of a shift in mentality, and the shift is actually, you know, when you build features, and this by the way starts from the moment you think about building a feature, right? So we know about ideation, you know, doing user research, problem discovery, solution discovery, usability tests. We send it to the engineers, we develop, we send it to the QA, we move to production. We need, as part of this kind of journey, to think, what is the motivation for the user to use this? At what part of the user journey, and again, this is not linear, at what part of the user journey, what kind of behavior we need to look for to be able to, you know, which point do we need to push this, right? So again, we start thinking about the triggers that are going to lead to this, right? And that's where, like, kind of we're going to talk about a very simple framework that can help you with that. But again, that's really the question is, you know, who is going to use this feature? Why? When? What are the triggers? What are the factors? Are they internal? Are they external? Right? And kind of map a little bit that journey. Okay. All right. So a huge part of this is going to be experimentation, because a lot of the time, someone is going to come with a hypothesis, right? And you might have a lot of data, but the data are not always going to be like give you a straight answer, right? So you need to kind of do some experimentation to kind of confirm that your hypothesis is correct. A really great example that I've seen recently, and I think we can take this example and kind of look at the framework based on that, is when Slack introduced, and I think everybody here uses Slack, when Slack introduced message scheduling, which by the way was one of the most highly requested features, right? But when they introduced it, they didn't just come and say like, look, we're just going to announce it to everybody, right? So there was some sort of context. And I'm assuming that during some meeting in the product or whatever, is that someone said, look, I think someone would use this if they're trying to message someone in a different time zone. And that's a hypothesis. They started with this hypothesis. Okay, how do we test it, right? And then, there's a bunch of ways, maybe we want to create a way to kind of communicate that. There's a bunch of ways, by the way, but let's say in this case, they chose a tooltip to kind of highlight that option. And they can roll this to 50% of their audience. And of course, with the context is that someone needs to start typing a message to someone where it's like 2 or 3 or 4 a.m. where they are, because that is the most likely person to adopt that feature at that moment. But guess what? Once they adopt it, now you have developed some sort of a behavior that they'll come back to it in a habit. That's how you start forming a lot of these habits, right? So someone might have that hypothesis, and then they would roll it out to 20, 30% of their audience. They would show this and kind of be able to confirm that these people are more likely to actually adopt that feature. Very contextual. I think I loved kind of that example a little bit. So if we can go and talk very quickly about how do we develop this this framework. First of all, right, and I'll speak about, let's say we're speaking about a specific feature. Let's say it's an existing feature, it's not a new feature, right? So first of all, we need to understand feature adoption, right? So we need to actually measure how many people are using it, how often they're using it, right? And sometimes it's a journey. This is why I included journey, because some features are actually multiple events. So you need to do like A and then B and then C. It can get a little bit more complicated because then you have a drop off and then you need to account for that. The second thing is that we need to understand the persona, right? But at least now we have some sort of context, because we're only gonna go after people that have used the feature, right? We're not, we're doing user research based on the successful users that are, using the feature. Then we're gonna run some experiments and then analyze the results and kind of iterate, right? And obviously you're gonna do this for all of the important secondary features that you have. Okay, so tracking features, obviously, there's different ways to track features. There's a lot of tools out there that will allow you to even do no code with, like, say, feature tagging, right? Very easy. We need to be able to identify both the adoption, the usage frequency. What are the segments that are using this feature more than others? Is there, like, is there a discoverability issue, or is there, there's many ways that where you can actually use this data, right? Again, you can use something very simple like the visual feature tag for this, or you can use track events. There's a bunch of reports that you can run on this. For example, like, I want to see the percentage of users that have actually used this feature. You can also do that by segment. You can see a trend of not just the unique usage, but also the total, right? You can actually plot the unique versus the total. So on average, how many unique users are using it, and also on average, the people are using it, how often are they using it? So yeah, you can run a lot of these reports, and then we kind of want to develop some sort of the persona, right? So there's a lot of things you can do here to again try to understand the internal and external factors, but you need to focus on the successful users that are using it. You can study the behavior with things like, for example, one of my favorite tools is Full Story. Very very simple. I can literally just create a segment of the people that have clicked the button because they track everything, right? And then I can watch, use this feature for the first time, and then I watch a bunch of the sessions to kind of try to understand again a lot of that motivation that is happening. You can potentially also use in-app surveys, again, with context, right? We don't want to just send the survey to everybody saying, oh, what did you think of that feature? Maybe we want to, segment everybody that have used it, say, in the past month, this many times, and then show them the survey. Maybe you'll get some sort of insights on those kind of factors. And as well as, kind of the least scalable one is user interviews, because that does take some time, but it can be incredibly useful. At that stage, like, you would want to start formulating a hypothesis for that specific feature. These are the users, these are the segments that are using it the most. This is how they're using it. These are the reasons why they're using it. That's kind of like the whatever external or internal factors that are happening. Again, with the Slack example, it's pretty simple in the Slack example, but it can get a lot more complicated with more complex features. But you could formulate a hypothesis like, look, I think the best time to use this feature is when you're messaging someone in a different time zone. So maybe that's the right time to push for it. So you want to run some experiments. There's a lot of ways to kind of tell people about a specific feature, obviously. There is, you can use in-app messages, you can use email, you can use, widgets, announcement widgets, etc., etc. My favorite one is to do something in-app, because it's like literally you want to act in real time, because we said context matters the most, right? And the best way to kind of intervene in real time to kind of interrupt a little bit that user experience is with things like slide outs, modals, tooltips, in-app messaging. And the idea here would be to kind of either say, yes, my hypothesis was correct, confirm the hypothesis, or say, like, oh, we weren't able to actually confirm it. So you can easily kind of do that with like a simple. There's a lot of experiments that you can do with in-app, but the simplest one would be kind of the null hypothesis, which is, I show a specific users in a specific situation kind of that message, and then the rest, maybe show 50%, and the other 50% don't show them anything, and then see and put a goal. The goal would be either the adoption of the feature, or maybe usage over the next whatever week or two, and then easily kind of run that experiment. At that point, exactly kind of what are the triggers, and you can just roll that product experience out to everybody. And That's it. It's literally feature discovery on autopilot, right? Because you discovered the right moment to intervene, right? So you build that experience, and that's it. You don't have to worry uh, about it anymore. Okay. And so yeah, finally, when once you're done with this, you look at, you obviously confirm your assumption, look at your findings. Are you able to actually increase that feature usage? And yeah, I mean, obviously a big part of this is going to be it's an iteration process, and a learning process as well. um, Obviously it's not always easy, because a lot of times it's very difficult to kind of come up with these hypotheses and confirm them. But 100%, if you're intervening at the right moment, you will push that user activation up 100%. Okay, so I think right now, just kind of as a summary, um, again, we need to kind of understand the different stages of the user journey, as we spoke about them, and that feature discovery is actually difficult. It's not very linear, but the most important thing here is context. And to actually be able to understand the context, we need to understand the factors and the motivations that the user has for that specific feature, and then kind of deploy some sort of method of intervention to uh, to push the user for that feature at that right moment. And that basically, this is in my opinion, the most important part of the PLG motion, because yes, activation is important, but also that kind of solves a lot of the secondary features, where literally the product is the center, where the center of your growth. The product itself, instead of having your customer success kind of tell the users about this feature and that feature, the product itself is intervening in exact moment based on context to drive more adoption.
Thank you. Hearing you, I couldn't help myself but think about this. Like, I'm sure like you gave some tips here and there during the presentation, but maybe it would be good to like emphasize this one more time, because I know that since the day I just stepped into this sector, I know that we're avoiding to be a feature factory. Okay, so how we can adapt secondary features, but we can avoid being a feature factory.
So how can we avoid being feature factories?
While adapting secondary features for the product.
Look, I think they're just two different. So I don't think the companies need to stop building features. Obviously, I think we need to include the kind of the feature discovery aspect when building these features. And also we need to put more resources in our teams to focus on secondary feature adoption. Because if all your focus is to build, you're literally wasting. I think there was something I've read, where I think 50 or 55% of the features in the B2B SaaS are rarely or never utilized, right? So think about that. If 55% of your features are rarely or never used, that means out of your R&D power, that's that's at the end of the day, that's money, right? That's time and money that you've spent developing those features, when it's actually better to release less features, but focus on making sure that your user base is actually adopting these features, right? A lot of the time, especially in good companies, features are not being used not because they're not good. I think a lot of companies actually do a good job with kind of building the right things, and doing good user research, and coming up with good solution. It's just that the discoverability of these features, and I understand a lot of the time these features are complex, but also think about the motivation of the user, right? If the user has zero motivation to kind of for that feature discovery, or to kind of put the energy and effort to adopt that workflow, then that's a lost battle, right? But even if the feature is complex, but it's actually the right motivation, the right internal and external factors are there, then the user will put in more kind of time and energy to get that working,
Mhm.
right? And that's, yeah.
Thank you. I think we can start answering some questions from our audience. So the first question will be from Ragav. What if 30% of users use X feature, 70% users of they use Y feature? Do we still keep the X feature though traction is not what we expected?
um I mean, 30% of users using a feature, that's not bad.
Yeah.
30% of your user base using a feature is not bad. I think I think I would try to understand again the what could be done to increase the adoption for that, or again, feature discoverability for me is the biggest problem. So are users actually finding that feature? What are you doing to facilitate feature discovery for that one? um, I wouldn't kill it before I kind of understand that.
I would agree. And the second question would come from, one second, let's done answering this. Let's answer this one from Anuran. How can product teams leverage user personas, context, and triggers to encourage feature adoption?
So yeah, so this is very similar to what I was discussing. I think a huge part of understanding the user journey is understanding the user personas that you're dealing with, and a lot of that you're not just gonna find out without looking to a lot of the qualitative data, right? So how does this segment kind of utilize the software differently than say in another segment, right? What are the different jobs to be done for each persona, right? And again, once you start understanding that more, you start to understand the motivation for these personas and their jobs to be done, and what kind of value they're trying to, how are you making their lives better, um, then you kind of are able to, and it's obviously more complex than that, but you kind of try to understand kind of some sort of a user journey for each kind of persona. And yes, it's not all the people that are using our software are the same, right? There's different personas that want to get different things done, right? So you are able to kind of understand different user journeys, and then based on that path, okay, well, what are the triggers for that persona so that I can keep kind of giving more value? Because at the end of the day, and I said this at the beginning, your job as someone in product is to deliver more value for users, right? And the biggest way that we can influence that value is through, first of all, the adoption of new features. That's obviously very important, but also how much are they using existing features. So yeah, it's not always easy, but at the end of the day, you know try to understand context. That's number one, and then also uh, track everything, because like if Slack in that example wanted to trigger that message when someone starts like doing X, right? You need to track X so that you're able to trigger that message when a person does that, right? So yeah, you need to track a lot of that.
Thank you. And the other question is from Alexandra. Experiments might be great, but might also cost a lot. For example, the developer's capacity or cost of the third-party tool, etc. How to navigate around useful and valuable experimentation and get a buy-in from stakeholders.
That's a great question. Um, so right, like, so there's two things that I want to differentiate here, right? So when there are some experiments that you do that would require you to change things in your application, right? So that those are costly changes, right? So for example, I think that we need to change this button or change this page to that because I have this hypothesis, right? Those are costly. Um, and I understand that a lot of the stakeholders will look at that and be very skeptical of this, right? And then you have things that are way less costly, which like, and they can affect the product experience, like showing a tooltip. Like, look, I'm gonna show this segment at this moment when they after they do X, I'm gonna show them this message, right? Whether there's a bunch of ways to deliver messages right now, like through a lot of like chat, in-app chat that became popular at some point 3-4 years ago, right? And now like you have all these user engagement tools that would allow you to build like a modal slide out tooltips, hotspots, etc., etc. Those are way less costly to kind of do that, and if they allow you to do experimentation as well, that's quick win. And I think you can actually use that first before committing to a change that would affect your application, like a change in the page layout or how a feature actually works. But yeah, no, I understand.
Thank you. And last two questions. Hold your breath. And the other one is from Julian. So, were the user personas, context, and triggers not considered during ideation and hypothesis testing before development to a certain acceptable LTV?
I understand the question. Where I'm not sure I understand the question.
Mm,
Let's
I
think
think they
about it.
were considered, though, what I understand from this session today. User personas are definitely.
Were the user personas, context, and triggers not considered during ideation and hypothesis testing before development to uh, a certain acceptable LTV? I'm not sure. I understand it. Maybe I'm blanking here,
Um,
but do you
I
understand it?
I would like to answer this question as maybe. Oh no, I thought maybe Alexander was in the chat box. I thought maybe it was Julian trying to explain the question, but I would like to answer this question. Of course, they were considered in all the ideation and hypothesis for the coming up with the secondary features of the product, I would say. Okay, let's move on. Thank you, everyone, for giving me the stage for this question. Let's move on to the last question then. And Julian, maybe we will get back to you once we have the answer for your question. When we find the right intervention moments, how do we set this up in user pilot? Does this require getting IT involved or can our product team manage themselves? Curious of your thoughts from Jonathan.
Oh, first question about user pilot. Okay. Um, so yeah, this is not just for user pilot, for I think a lot of the user engagement tools out there, and even the product analytics tools like Mixpanel, Heap, Amplitude. I feel like there's kind of two school of thoughts here about tracking events. I think there's the no code tracking. I think Heap and Full Story are like big ones that tell you like you don't need to track anything. Like we'll track every click, every page view, everything for you. So I think a lot of these tools actually do a lot of that tracking for you. UserPy also does have no code feature tagging. Um, it, I'm a big fan of actually tracking things using actually like programmatically, because I feel like with no code tracking, when the page changes or the HTML, there's a change here or there. I mean, it does tend to give you like incorrect results or phantom clicks. So yeah, I mean, you're able to segment using user attributes, company attributes. These are just like literally attributes about the user, like their plan or their sign up date or any of that information. And then actual behavior like page views, button clicks, and track events. And you can use all of that to kind of trigger the right experience at the right moment. So, for example, you could say, after they create a campaign, I want to show them a message saying, uh, great job, you've just created a campaign, now do the next thing, which is, whatever it is that you need to do after, creating a campaign, turn it on or push it live or whatever, right? So if I have a track event for creating campaign, say, whatever, mixpanel.track or userpy.track created a campaign, then you can easily know the exact moment this happened and intervene in real time um, to kind of push that.
Thank you, me and Jonathan and the other audience. We appreciate your answer, Yazan. And also, we appreciate that you were here today. I think since we have no more questions, we're coming to end of the session. If there is anything else you would like to add before we go.
Um, Thank you for hosting me, and thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah, and I hope today was helpful.
I think it was definitely. Thank you for your great insights on user onboarding, secondary adoption, features adoption. And
Thank
thank
you.
you, everyone, for joining and being with us today. Hope to see you at our next session and have a good rest of your day.